Today's guest is Brendan Aronson, Naval Academy grad, former Marine infantry officer, Wharton MBA, and entrepreneur. After turning down offers from Goldman Sachs, Google, and several other prominent roles, Brendan chose the harder path, launching startups and building organizations to support transitioning veterans. He's hosted over 100 episodes of the MilVet Podcast, run in-person events across the country, and now he's launching a fund to invest in defense tech and veteran-led businesses. Today, we'll talk about the biggest lessons from his journey so far, from why distribution is the first problem every founder must solve to the habits that signal future success. Thanks for joining us on this veteran venture. Most people you talk to when transitioning out of the military have never actually transitioned out themselves. You're probably getting a bunch of opinions from people who plan on staying in until retirement and have no idea how to actually show empathy for your situation. This podcast is about providing fresh perspectives and a front row seat for conversations with successful veterans doing big things after leaving the military.
Griffin, your voice on that microphone I feel like it's like the Lord reaching down from above. It's beautiful.
I have not heard that, but I appreciate it. Thank you.
You got the late night FM DJ voice going strong.
I love it.
And when I'll be self-conscious and try not to use my DJ voice as often, but
Should do it. It sounds good.
well, thank you. Well, Brandon, no need to give the premise of the show to you. I think you're probably well aware of what we're working to do since you're working on the same kind of mission in a number of aspects. Love the work that you guys do, have followed closely with the military veteran, your podcast, all the things that you've produced. And so we're excited about this conversation. I know that you've proven in spades that you have a ton of value to offer people. So glad to tap into a little bit of that and just get some anecdotes today through this conversation.
Yeah, I don't know how much value I have to add, but you get one schmuck's opinion. So if it's useful to someone, then that's great. Yeah, I'm excited for the conversation and grateful for you guys having me on.
Awesome. Well, we'll dive in, get straight to it. You've got a podcast with over 100 episodes. You have hired probably hundreds, if not thousands, of veterans through the MilVet and provided resources to them. So you do a ton of stuff for people in the space. But before all of that, can you tell us a little bit about your background, where you come from, and what got you into this world to begin with?
For sure. I am originally from Baltimore, and I was the youngest of three kids growing up, so constantly getting beat up, which set me on the path towards the Naval Academy and eventually the Marine Corps. So I went to the academy. I was a class of 2012 grad, majored in quantitative economics because I just had an interest in econ and always loved math. And so it was kind of the synthesis of those two. I was a NARP at the academy, non-athletic regular person, which is a bummer, and I'm sure, catch the requisite amount of crap for that. But I did track my freshman year, and then other than that, was really focused on trying to become a Marine. So graduated in 2012, went into the Marine Corps. Along the way, I recruited my brother into our beloved Corps as well, though I never got any kind of kickback from the Marine Corps. And he's a great American. He's still serving in our beloved Corps. And
Do
then
you have any affiliate link or anything for the Marines?
I wish I should be getting kickback because I recommend it. I feel like this is true broadly across careers. So maybe this is my first piece of advice is that almost everybody that you talk to about their careers will kind of recommend to you to do what they did,
Mm.
right? Which makes it, I think, challenging for transitioning veterans to figure out what they want to do next because they're getting a lot of different kinds of information. But, I had such an amazing experience in the Marine Corps that I feel like I should have an affiliate kickback because it was a really just incredible experience and developmental. So yes, I was an infantry officer out on the West Coast for 6 years. Did my platoon commander time. I did a deployment to Asia, so I spent more time than I would care to in the jungles of Okinawa, walking into banana spiders and the like, which was scarring in its own way. And then we bounced a little bit to mainland Japan, spent some time in Thailand. So that was my first deployment. And then my second deployment, I was in an advisory role when we were fighting against ISIS. So this was in 2016 when ISIS controlled all the way to the outskirts of Baghdad. We were on an operating base between Ramadi and Fallujah, helping the Iraqi army figure out how they were going to retake this large swath of land from ISIS, and then coordinating airstrikes as well. So that was a developmental experience, really interesting one. And then when came home, spent a little bit of time at Advisor Training Branch on the West Coast, just training folks to go do what I had done. And then got out and went through a transition program into Goldman Sachs. So Goldman is a huge investment bank, meaning they provide mergers and acquisitions advisory services to companies, and then they help with the financing too. So they like to phrase it as a trusted strategic financial advisor to Fortune 1000, Fortune 500 companies. And so I was in the healthcare group there briefly. I shared a two-man fighting position with another fellow Marine. So there's a great contingent of veterans in finance who were all super helpful to me in my own transition. And then got an MBA at Wharton. So I was in the full-time program there. Went back the summer between my first and second year to Goldman because I had just like an awesome experience there. And then I ended up declining a full-time offer in order to launch my own startup and launched the military veteran. So it's very catchy branding. You can tell we did not agonize over the name. But essentially, on my way out of the Marine Corps, I was working at a nonprofit called Service to School. So that nonprofit's helped thousands of veterans matriculate in higher ed. It's created pathways for veterans into undergraduate programs, which historically had very few student veterans. And on the MBA side and the law school side, veterans were always pretty well represented, but undergrad was the primary focus of the org, and it still is today. And they're doing amazing work over there. And we were hearing from a lot of the alumni of that program that they were having a tough time finding a job. And so my partner for the MilVet is Tim Shaw, he was an Army guy by background and was actually one of the co-founders of Service to School. And so he and I were like, there's got to be a better way to transition out of the military. No one's really looked at this space in a serious way in a while. And so we started by just hosting in-person career conferences to let veterans hear from folks that were having, an exceptional private sector career, and for them to be able to provide that advice from a stage to an audience and for folks to be able to start building their networks. Over time, we added on a recruiting business. So we started, helping companies hire veterans in a more deliberate fashion, understanding what the client needs and what they're looking for in a specific role, and then helping them find like the perfect person for that role. And so, to your point, in that capacity, I've helped a lot of folks transition into those next opportunities, and I've just talked to a lot of companies about what's important to them about hiring. And so we built that company over the course of the last 3 years. And then we recently transitioned the CEO title. So I'm no longer leading the business to a man named Jim Lose, who we recruited last year. In startups, they say it's important to, eat your own dog food, basically utilize your own product if you believe in it. And so we took the same approach that our clients demand of us, which is to find them the best qualified person in the world for their open roles. And so we asked ourselves, who's the best in the world at what we do? And that person is Jim Lose. So we spent months talking to him, recruiting him out of the firm that he was at. He had been at one firm since leaving the Marine Corps, which was called the Lucas Group, which was then acquired by Korn Ferry, who is like the Goldman of executive recruiting, right? They are like the name brand executive search firm. And so he had a lot of different experience from those 25 years, but all of it focused on the veteran population. And so we recruited him over to lead the business as the CEO. And then concurrently, for the last 3 years, I worked as a venture investor at Context Ventures, which is also led by Tim Shaw. Tim is the general partner at Context, meaning he's the decision maker who, decides what we're going to invest in. So I worked with him there for a number of years and then left Context at the beginning of the year and just turned over the reins at TMV to open up space for a new endeavor, which I'm happy to talk about as well. So that's 30,000 foot overview, maybe more information than you care to know, but you got the long-winded version today.
No, that's great. There's a number of things I'd like to double click on there, and especially what's next for you, because I'm very interested to hear that. I would like to quickly draw a mutual connection, and he would be mortified if I didn't mention this on the show, but Drew Tucker, a fellow Gilman grad, he mentioned that you both were part of some group at Gilman that you maybe handed off to him. So he wanted to draw that connection. He'd be ecstatic that his name was mentioned on the show. So a mutual connection going way back in the archives.
For sure. Yeah, I think I saw him on LinkedIn the other day. He's like, he's at the U.S. Department of State as a
Yeah.
foreign service officer. He's a really impressive guy and just like a really warm, kind human being. But we play football together at God bless, at Gilman. But sadly, our high school is now known as the place that birthed Luigi Mangione. So it's such a bummer. But Drew's a delightful human being, and
Yeah.
please tell him I say hello.
I certainly will, and I'll send him a link to this so he can hear it himself. But yeah, thousands of great people coming out of Gilman. As much as I give Drew crap for it, but one can create some negative press for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I love the overview, but not to get too tactical with it, but with the MilVet, obviously you've transitioned somewhat out of it, but I'm sure
Yeah.
it's still your baby, right? How do you guys balance, guidance with people upon their transition, whether it's mindset or hard skills, and what do you guys value during that transition, and how do you kind of balance or rate those things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Let me caveat by saying that most of the clients that the MilVet works with are typically looking for someone that also has some private sector experience. Okay, so I think this is good and bad. It's obviously good because we're seeing people transitioning out who are like 2 or 3 steps down the road. right? So what is important in those interim 2 or 3 steps in order to move into more senior roles is, something that I could talk about. But I would say we've spent a lot of time studying the transition space. And we do work with some transitioning veterans in terms of our clients who are actively recruiting. I believe they have a company right now they're recruiting for transitioning junior officers on the West Coast. But the transition out of the uniform is like a mind, body, and spirit endeavor. Maybe like a little bit melodramatic to say it that way, but like it is a pretty significant shift in your life. What makes it challenging is 3 things. One, you are losing your sense of purpose and your mission. So you used to say, I am a Marine, right? That no longer applies. So that's the first thing is how do you establish what is important in terms of your purpose on Earth and how are you going to measure success? Because it is more difficult to do in a private sector career. So that's the first piece, that loss of purpose. The loss of tribe is equally challenging. So you used to go into work and be surrounded by people who have the same cultural affinity, who have the same background, who have similar focus on the mission at hand. And then that is no longer the case when you're in the private sector, when you're transitioning out. So you have to be really deliberate about both building a new private sector network and also just making sure that you're watering those old relationships and staying in touch with the men and women that you served with so that you can be helpful to them, so that they can help you. And because it's just, those are people who, the beauty of life and being a human being is the relationships that we build. So it's just very important. And then finally, the loss of the financial security that comes from serving in the military, right? So private sector careers can be more volatile. And so that can take some getting used to, I think, for folks as they think about their careers, is it's just less financial security. So those 3 things are what makes it really challenging, but all of them come down to having the right mindset. And so you mentioned like hard skills versus having the right mindset. They're both critical, got to have them both, but the mindset is what colors your entire view and perception of the world. So if you're only looking at the world through, rose-colored glasses, you're only going to see a certain thing. So it's really important for folks when they get out of the military. I just threw the kitchen sink at the wellness stuff. If someone said it was a good idea, I tried it, right? Getting good sleep, proper nutrition, making sure that I'm getting some exercise. I have a really bad lingering back issue from the Marine Corps, which is a huge bummer, but I try and get out on a walk every day, which is like my younger self would be like, damn, dude, that's some weak stuff. Come on, man. But you know what? When I get those walks in, I feel better. My mind feels better. I feel more clear. I do better thinking. So whatever gets you moving is really important. And then the other mindset thing I think that's really important is that I think we live in a society that gives such immediate gratification. And like to do something exceptional takes a lot of work over a very long period of time. And so I get folks that transition out and say, I want to be a venture investor. How do I get into a role where I can be a venture investor? And I tell them like, that's a really difficult career path to break into, very difficult. It's actually a hard place to make money too. Like it's hard to succeed in venture. And then, but if you tell me I want to get a job in venture in the next year, I would tell you that may or may not happen. I'm not sure about the likelihood of that. If you tell me I want to build a career in venture over the next 30 years, I'd be like, there's zero reason why you couldn't do that. That's a long period of time. And if you have that in your back pocket as something that you're on the lookout for and you're talking to people to get into that kind of position, that's a bet I'd place every day that you'll get into a role in venture, right? And the path is going to be different than whatever you're imagining, but over a long time horizon, almost anything is possible.
Yeah, I love that. And it's not just setting expectations and choosing the right horizon, but it's also when you're in it, being accepting of that horizon and not expecting things to come like that. I think Alex Hormozy's big on that. If you think you're failing, just reassess the time horizon. And if you give yourself a little bit more time, eventually that failure can turn into success and it'll be, good for you if you can. But people, especially nowadays, just want things now. They want to,
Yes.
and I think Griffin and I are subject to that as well. I know I am, at least.
We all are. Everybody is. For what it's worth, Hormozy's also a Gilman grad, and he was in my class. He's a good guy. And I love his writing. I think it's like really helpful, especially for, former Marines who can barely read and write. So I think his stuff is great, but
Man, Greyhounds
yeah,
all over the place.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah, Brendan, how do you justify the kind of the juxtaposition between we've noticed that a lot of people have almost analysis paralysis from thinking that the next endeavor they go into, the next job that they go into is a requirement for 10 plus years, that they're locking away almost as if it's a military contract. They're locking into that against the thought and what you just said about how it takes 10 years, it takes decades to really build something meaningful and not to really tap into certain career fields that might be difficult to find success in over a shorter period of time.
It's difficult. I would say a couple things. First, I think it's really helpful to have a general sense of where your career is going to go, to look 20 years in the future and say, what seat do I want to be in? And then try and backplan a little bit of what key steps did people take in order to get into similar types of seats, right? So that's step zero, I guess, is like intelligence gathering. Right. And so your guys' podcast can be really helpful for that. Our podcast, the MilVet Podcast, I think is also helpful for that. And just having those networking conversations with folks that are deeper into their career, like what was really critical for you to get into that role, that I think can be helpful for backwards planning. So that's one point. The second point is private sector careers are nonlinear. So in the military, this is what makes it additionally challenging to plan a career. In the private sector is like in the military, I can tell what rank you are. I can tell what you've done by what you wear on your chest. And I know I had a mentor in the Marine Corps who got promoted to be a major, and I congratulated him on that. And he said, if you show up right time, right place, right uniform, like 70% of the time, you too can be a major in the Marine Corps, which I thought was pretty funny. But you know what it takes to get to that next seat, right? So to get selected for major, I have to have company command as a captain, or to get selected for lieutenant colonel, I got to have an OPSO or XO observe fit rep, right? The private sector is just not like that. People don't wear their rank on their sleeves. You can't tell what they've done. The nomenclature can be really opaque. That's especially true in careers in financial services. And each of these different industries has their own jargon too. So it can be difficult, which is why it's so important to listen to resources like this one so that you can learn the vernacular and learn how people talk about private sector careers. And then there's this mindset shift around the linearity of careers. So private sector careers, people will move to a role that will maybe not a great fit for them, and they're only there for a little bit of time, but then their next role is like a big move, step up. It's like a stepwise function, right? These kind of things happen. And if you're in the right time and right place, like I know a veteran that transitioned and was one of the first folks to work at a firm, which is a huge payments firm that scaled while he was there from like $10 million a year of revenue to like billions of dollars of revenue. And his role grew non-linearly. He started in an individual contributor role, and by the time he finished, he was like the deputy COO or something like that. It was like a very senior role where he had like hundreds of people working for him. That doesn't really happen in the military. And so that's the beauty of private sector careers, is that they have that opportunity for asymmetric growth. But then the flip side is they also have the capacity if your business is not doing well and it's going through layoffs. You could be a really high performer. You can be doing all of the right things. And it's just like, hey, it's not personal. It's just, we just don't have the cash for this anymore. So that's what we mean when we say that careers are nonlinear. So I don't know if that answers your question or if I was completely awry on a tangent, but
No,
that's
it,
what you
it
get.
definitely does. I would also love to just quickly go back to your transition. You mentioned that you did an internship, or you kind of had a more of a smooth transition out. Can you speak to any organizations you found that were helpful for that, and a little bit more about how you went about that process specifically? And maybe within the context of, you mentioned that a number of the organizations you guys were recruiting for, that you guys work with, are not looking for direct out of service folks. They're looking for someone with private sector experience beforehand. So maybe what would be helpful for someone to get that experience beforehand, so then they could be more useful in those future roles of look for the prior experience?
Yeah, good question. I mean, as it pertains to my own transition, I think it's funny because when you describe it ex post or like in retrospect, it seems to be like very smooth sailing and like the story was like logical and it makes sense. But dude, I had a hell of a go of it on my way out of the Marine Corps. Like personal stuff, like I lost my dad, like my mental health suffered tremendously. Like I was in a really dark place for a period of time. And so I would just encourage people to think when you hear interviews like this, or when you hear about someone else's story that has accomplished something that you think would be interesting to you in your private sector career, they're talking about the highlights, but everybody has these challenges. So I think it's really important, just don't lose hope along the way. Organizations that were helpful in my own transition, I already mentioned service to school. I think getting involved in a nonprofit is really helpful. It's like a low threat way to make a bunch of friends that are focused on a common mission and to just do some good with your time on the planet. So yeah, that's one that I would definitely recommend. And then outside of that, I mean, the MBA program was really helpful because it's like a built-in friend network and an educational opportunity too. And it just gives you a little bit of time and space to think. So I'm a fan of recommending that for folks. It's not necessary or sufficient to be successful, right? Whatever that means to each individual, but it was helpful for me. And then the thing that was most helpful is something that can be replicated by any human being that's listening to this podcast, which is to reach out to a lot of people. I reached out to hundreds of people when I was transitioning out. Hey, can you take 30 minutes to tell me about your career? I'd love to learn more. I must have talked to like half of the veterans at Goldman. And I asked one of them, I was like, what is the purpose of networking? Like, I don't understand this. Like, what am I doing here? He was like, yeah, it's a good question. Nobody's ever asked me that. And in TAPS, they basically taught me that networking was just like smashing the connect button on LinkedIn, which is like not good networking. And so he described it for me really simply, which is like, what's your goal with this phase is that at some point we're going to be in a room of 5 or 6 veterans that are going to be looking to hire for the veteran associate program. And we're going to be going through a stack of resumes. And what you want is that when they get to your resume, someone in the room is, oh, I talked to that guy and he was like a normal guy, seemed interested in the role. I think we should interview him. And that 2 or 3 other people around that table say the same thing. Oh yeah, he hit me up too. It's okay. Well, this guy's obviously like very interested. So, and then more holistically, networking is about forging authentic relationships and trying to be helpful to other people and then being open to allowing them to help you in return. I think it feels really transactional for a lot of transitioning veterans because they don't necessarily have something to offer of value at the moment. And so they feel like, oh, I'm just hitting this person up because I need a job. And that's not the kind of person that I am. And I want to be hired for my own skill sets and my resume and my accomplishments. But that's only really true in the military. Someone cannot help you or hire you if they don't know that you exist. And so this is a horizontal theme of your business career, which is make a lot of friends and try and be as helpful to them as humanly possible. And with no expectations of reciprocity of someone doing it in return, but like good things will happen if you put good things out into the universe, and those people will think of you when opportunities arise.
Absolutely. And you seem like such a great example of adding value without any expectation of things coming back. I mean, I can't imagine you foresaw meeting Tim Shaw at Service to School when you volunteered there, right? And I
No,
have
no,
to
no.
imagine that relationship has led to all sorts of things after the fact. And so simply being willing to be that person who volunteers at a nonprofit, just simply helping others for an extended period of time has come back in major dividends. I imagine, not to
For sure.
speak to your story, but it seems like that's the case.
Well, just like one quick example of that is the folks that helped me when I was transitioning into the MBA programs. I ran the same playbook and reached out to a ton of veterans that were at the schools. It was like, what do you like? What do you dislike? What's the student body like, etc. A bunch of them helped me with the essays and applications, answered all my stupid questions because I couldn't even spell revenue at the time. But they did so because they were just trying to help another transitioning veteran. They were good human beings and they were just trying to be useful. I think I found a bunch of those folks new opportunities and new jobs. And they were not doing it because they were like, well, there's a chance in 7 years or 8 years that this dude will have a job opportunity that will be helpful to me. That's not why they did it. But, these are the people I think of because I think of them as friends and mentors and people that have been helpful to me. And so it's, yeah, of course, if I've got a way that I could be of service to you in return, like I want to help you because I like you. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Brendan, I think that's so well put. And I think one of the things you mentioned is that anybody can do that, right? It doesn't take a master's degree to be able to reach out to people. And as long as you're have that authenticity and you're genuinely curious, that's what can help bridge the gap of, well, what do I have to offer? Sometimes people are just happy that you are curious about their industry or about their field. And that curiosity can allow somebody to have a conversation with you for 30 minutes, and it just
yes,
can create that relationship, maybe give you a little bit of, data points to go off of and make decisions moving forward. But I think that's a great way to put that. And like I said, I wanted to double down on literally anybody can do that. You can be a specialist transitioning out, or you can be a lieutenant colonel transitioning out. That is a common thread among all of us.
for sure. And people want to help you. You're at this unique juncture where you can reach out to almost anyone on the planet and say, hey, I'm transitioning out of the military and I really could use a hand. Would you be willing to spend 30 minutes talking to me? And there's 2 roles in life for which that is true, that people will be like, dude, I'll help you if I can. It's transitioning out of the military. And if you're a student in a university, those are like you can reach out to anyone on the planet and anybody on the planet will at least be like, yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah.
Right.
Brennan, so you declined Goldman. I heard you on a previous conversation. You said you turned down a role at Google and other things. So what was it that prompted you to decline those, what everyone would think are kind of once in a lifetime or amazing opportunities to start the MilVet? And was the MilVet your first startup experience? Did you have some false starts along the way?
I had some false starts. False start would be like an unfair characterization. Okay, so your question is like, why turn down good opportunities that seem like total no-brainers that I've been working at for years to create the opportunity for myself in order to pursue something very risky and without any guarantee of like positive outcomes? It's a long story. The quick story is my dad passed away almost right when I got out of the Marine Corps, 6 months later. And it was my first month at Wharton. And I wanted to go into finance for a variety of reasons, but many of those reasons had pertained to like financial stability and financial outcomes, right? They're high margin careers. So, and part of that was to support him because he was unwell, to say the least, towards the tail end of his life and not in a good financial situation, which is also an understatement. And so I had time to reflect after investment banking recruiting, which was like a miserable experience. But I had some time to reflect, and it was like, man, if I live as long as him, I've probably only got 30 years left, And that's a blink of an eye. That's almost no time at all. I'm over halfway there. And so I thought I had this feeling that I wanted to start something of my own in the future. And my hypothesis at the time, I had a lot of professors that were like, if you're going to start something, do it now while you're already broke so that you don't have to leave behind a high earning job, when you've got more responsibility and more people relying on you, like a family, do it now, get in the fight now, because it'll be easier to do it, to take the swing. So that was a data point. And then my hypothesis was essentially that I thought that if I started something on my own, it might not work out, but that was probably a skill set that I could build over a 30-year career and a relevant network that I could build by being in the arena, which would translate into something productive down the road. And so my first startup after B school was an art company in the consumer space called Paint True. Started with a couple other Naval Academy grads, one of whom is also a Gilman alum, Griffin. And it was a consumer business. We took people's favorite photos and had them hand painted by this network of artists that we had. Lots of lessons learned, like a lot of them. Consumer is really hard. For my next venture for the MilVet, we did a B2B company. We sell to businesses because I just have like too much scar tissue from consumer businesses personally. Ironically, I feel like I've actually developed a knack for marketing over the subsequent years running TMV, but at the time I did not have that. That was one takeaway. The people that you partner with, I had like amazing business partners for that who were like awesome human beings who I care about deeply. None of us were subject matter experts on consumer marketing or art, although one of my co-founders was certainly more knowledgeable about art than I was. So yeah, and then when Paint True didn't work out, I was interviewing for jobs, some of the bigger companies that you mentioned. I just felt like I had some juice left in the tank. I was like, you know what, man, I just got to do this for myself. And I, again, was like, well, I think I've got the skill set. I think I've learned a lot. And if I apply that to a different business or a different business model, I wonder if that would work. And it has definitely gone a lot better this time. So TMV is doing really well, thankfully. But yeah, it was all downstream of this flip in mindset from when we were running Paint True and it wasn't going well. I thought of myself as like a failure. Like I had a really negative view of myself as a human being. And so there were a lot of takeaways from that experience that were like, hey, you can do everything right, and sometimes things don't work out, or you can just not be very good, which was true of me, and things certainly won't work out. But as long as you just get a little bit better every day and you give yourself a long enough time horizon, it's almost impossible to continually fail all the way till the end.
Yeah. So with starting the transition from the first company to the second, was that driven, or the idea to pursue this, was that driven by like relationships, or was it a specific experience? Did you have a good mentor, during your transition that led, hey, like we could replicate this, or was it maybe a bad experience that led to the interest in this?
I mean, I had a lot of mentors and still do who have been like extremely generous with their time with me over the years. I mean, the real impetus for the MilVet was my relationship with Tim. So Tim, always been a friend and a mentor. He had invested in my first company, and we spent a lot of time on the phone talking about how to make that business work. And so we just developed this like deeper relationship over that time too, until when I was going to figure out the next thing to do, he was like, I think we should be looking at this thing. And, here's a problem set that I think is really interesting. And so do you want to start something with me? And it was like, yeah, for sure. For me, it was more about, man, I can learn from Tim and make an impact on people that I care about. And it's a tried and true business model and a different application of my skill set. And I'm going to build these different skills that are going to be valuable to me in the long run. And this is the other key point that I think is maybe a good takeaway more broadly. it was like a good application of the things that I like to do and I'm good at. I am not, if you put me in a role where I have to be making PowerPoint decks for 12 hours a day, like I will be very bad at that. Like I'm just, I don't have the patience for it. But if you get me in a situation like this, where I'm talking to human beings and having developing interpersonal connections and relationships and trying to be helpful to people, dude, I could do this all day, every day. This is how I love to spend my time. If I were retired, I would be doing this anyway, of just talking to people on the phone because that's the beauty of life. And not everybody's wired like that. Not everybody is like it would thrive in a role where your only job is to talk to people, right? But there are a handful of roles for which that is true. And so the more broad application of this lesson, I think, for your audience is like you will over time have to figure out what is the nature of the work that you like to do and put yourself in a position to be able to capitalize on that. Play to your strengths, play to the ways that you like to spend your time. They
Mhm.
say, oh, if you follow your passion, you'll never work at a day in your life. That is not true. Like work is always work, but there are different types of work that lend themselves more naturally to your skill sets, whatever they might be. And so you want to put yourself into a position where you're able to capitalize on your strengths and do something that you find more enjoyable than other people. Because then you'll be willing to put in more time and you end up with this virtuous cycle of getting better at something. And then that reinforces the amount of time that you're putting into it, which makes you get better even
Mhm.
faster, etc.
Yeah, I think when I talk to people, we kind of try to visualize a Venn diagram with three circles. One circle is you got to make enough money to survive. You can't just make no money. But the other two are something that you like, what do you love to do? And what are you really good at? What can you be the best in the world at? And whatever's in the middle is probably going to be on your short list of careers to pursue. But with that, we've also brought up on the podcast, and I'm interested to ask your opinion. Do you pursue the thing that you love in order to kind of follow through on, never working a day in your life? I get what you're saying. Are you always working? Or do you pursue something that's going to be able to fund the future life that you're going to be able to have and maybe, hey, make a boatload of money with something you're good at and then pursue your interests later?
Man, it's a great question. I don't know if you've read the book. Oh God, there's a book that discusses this directly. It'll come to me. But the question is basically, do you pursue something that you're passionate about, or do you pursue something that pays the bills? Your suggestion for those three circles is a great suggestion. It's called an Ikigai exercise. Ikigai. So, what do I like doing? What does the world need? What am I good at? And what can I get paid for? The answer is you got to do all of the above. So, everybody has their own stack of priorities. And if you're transitioning out of the military and you haven't spent some time being a little bit deliberate about what is really important to you, is it the nature of the work? Is it who you're working with? That is always incredibly important. Is it the earnings potential? Is it the flexibility, right? These are like aspects of a career that every one of us must rack and stack in order to say, this is what success looks like in my mind. Plenty of people for whom success is like, hey, I just need to make 60,000 bucks a year and I don't really need a bunch of fancy stuff, but I really want to work with my hands and I really want to work in an environment with people that I really like. And it's like their definition of success is much different than mine.
Mhm.
For a lot of people, if you showed them how we live and the fact that I sit and stare at a computer for 12 hours a day, if you put a caveman who is like out hunting and gathering with his tribe and hanging out and whatever, eating berries by the campfire, and you showed him how I live, they'd be like, that's really dystopian. That's not what success looks like for everybody. So that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but I would say my recommendation is generally not to always follow just your passions, but rather follow something that you think you can be really good at, and then you will develop expertise, which will turn into a passion. Like no one is passionate about M&A. Like no one's born saying, I want to be a banker at Goldman Sachs. People want to be firefighters and astronauts and Marines and whatever else, but nobody says that they want to go build PowerPoint decks that'll never get looked at by CFOs of Fortune 500 companies, right? Or do M&A transactions. It's not something that people aspire to. But people go do it because they think, okay, it's a good skill set. I'll make some money. Like I'll learn some stuff. I'll meet some interesting people. I'll work on interesting problems. And a percentage of those people, a small percentage, will be like, I love this. This is so interesting and dynamic. And I love this aspect of it and this other aspect of it. And they will develop passion from being good at it. So, yeah, that's my general recommendation. I think that Ikigai exercise is helpful. I would encourage people to when they fill in those circles, to fill them in with sort of like intangible things. So we did this right before I started the MilVet, and a lot of the what I love doing was like talking to veterans and helping people be better versions of themselves, and providing like counseling and advice, and like what the world needs. It needs like mental health help, it needs whatever else. And so the thing that was at the intersection was like Brendan's going to either go be a therapist, or he's going to be like a coach of some sort, like an executive coach or something like that. And then lo and behold, it turns out that there's this whole other application of this skill set that I hadn't seen that actually just like strikes at that center point as well, which is investing and talent, right? And so, yeah, I think it's helpful. It's a helpful exercise. And then more holistically, I encourage people to do whatever it is that you need to do to pay the bills, and something that you think you can build a career around, a hypothesis that you can test out. And the unfortunate truth is that for many veterans, they will have to try a number of different things over the years. So I've got two saved rounds on this point. One is that folks should read the book Range by David Epstein, which talks about the generalist career path and how generalists maybe sometimes will struggle in a world that's very specialized. It's got some really tangible advice for folks that coming out of the military. The book even opens talking about a bunch of folks transitioning out of the military who are generalists on how to manage a generalist career. One of the takeaways is try a lot of different things, and those will combine in a really unique way that will allow you to become truly world-class at one thing at the intersection of multiple endeavors that you've had. That's one piece of advice. And then the second piece of advice, our community actually has a big black eye in terms of employment as it pertains to job switching. Something like 56% of veterans will leave their first job after the military within 12 months, which actually makes it a bit of a tricky proposition to hire folks coming straight out of the military. Now, what I would say is like anytime you get into a new role, the first 6 months is going to be a very steep learning curve. You're learning a whole new set of faces, a new function, a new industry. You're learning the corporate culture, how to do your job, and the skills required. So I encourage people to think with a little bit more longevity. Give it a year, give it 18 months before you're like, I know for sure that I don't like this about this thing. But the longevity within a role will actually become very important as you get more senior in your career. So switching through a lot of different careers, that when you hop from one job to another, that's your best chance to secure a big pay raise. But you'll see if people switch a lot, and then that actually ends up being a red flag for recruiters for more senior roles.
For one, the Range is the life manifesto that I wish I had written, so I'm glad you referenced that. Always within arm's reach at any time. And second of all, I love the Ikigai exercise. I think that's such a practical and helpful way for people to approach what do I really want? Because oftentimes it's hard, it's almost impossible to answer that question. What do you want to do? What's next for you? When really a lot of people most accurately can answer, what do I not want? What do I not want things to look like? So you can work that inversion to figure out what the next steps might be. And I heard you also mention strategizing versus just going out and doing. Sometimes it's going to take those, trying out a hypothesis, doing some trial and error, doing a job that you may think might fit some of those pieces of the Ikigai, but may not check all of them. So it's certainly an iterative process like anything else, figuring out what pieces are being put in place that are going to really scratch the itch of what you're interested in and continuing to iterate through that process. So I love a lot of the pieces of what you just said there. I think it's super helpful.
Yeah, that negative or the reverse of what do I not want to do or what doors can I close, that's actually really helpful razor too. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I've been meaning to ask or wanting to ask, Brendan, what is next for you now that you've transitioned the MilVet? You kind of sunset things with Context, I assume, earlier this year. So what's the next step?
Yeah, I am in the process of raising a national security focused fund. So we're hoping to do a first close at the end of this quarter, but we are investing in venture and private equity funds that are focused on industries that are absolutely vital to US national security. So AI, cybersecurity, biotech, defense, American manufacturing. So I've been, since the beginning of the year, spending my time fundraising for our fund. And then we have a really unique partnership with the DoD that allows them to invest in our fund as well and has a bunch of additional miscellaneous benefits. So it feels like the culmination of a lot of work over the last 18 months setting conditions for this. I'm lucky I have an amazing business partner who's a great American, also a veteran, who's been investing in funds for 15 years and is just a remarkable track record. So yeah, a little bit of a different application of the skill set, but ultimately we're evaluating the talent of our underlying fund managers and the macroeconomic trends that we think will make, different industries successful. It's a really fun way to spend time. And I'm back in the 0 to 1 phase, which is exciting. And everything in business is challenging, but there's varying degrees of challenging if you can find things that match well to your specific skill set. So I'm having a lot of fun, and so far it's going really well too, which also feels good.
That's really interesting. So it's a fund of funds, if you will, investing in
That's right.
other venture funds. What is the perk to that model versus investing directly in the businesses themselves?
Good question. For our investors, they get diversified exposure across like 300 to 400 privately held companies. So a venture fund might invest in 20 to 40 companies, but the returns profiles for venture funds tend to be concentrated, meaning, a large number of funds will not perform terribly well. And they're taking on a ton of risk, so it makes sense that with that level of risk, many of them will not do as well, and some of them will do extremely well, right? That's what the returns profile looks like for that asset class. In buyouts, it tends to be a little bit less risk because they're investing in more established companies that have more significant track record, that are already, generating significant revenues. And so the returns profile tends to be, you don't see those 10x, 15x funds like you might in venture, but you also see far fewer funds that don't return capital, right? And so for us, we give this diversified exposure. We're investing in both venture and private equity funds, right? So you're getting exposure to both strategies and companies that are at different stages of their life cycles across different industries and across different vintages, right? So funds from this year, funds from next year, the year after, et cetera. So it's really like a diversified exposure to these alternative assets in industries that are huge total addressable markets that are rapidly growing, and allocation in funds that you otherwise would not be able to get. We are able to get that allocation because of the network that myself and my business partner have built up over the years that other folks might not, they either wouldn't know about these funds or they wouldn't be able to get into them themselves. And so, yeah, it is a pooled vehicle. Again, you're getting that diversification, but you're also getting the upside from this partnership with the DoD, which essentially acts as like a massive overcommitment for us. They don't share in the profits interests, but rather they get repaid their principal balance and the interest associated with these notes.
That's awesome. And it sounds like an amazing way to both work on interesting problems while also investing your time, energy, and money into things that matter and things that drive national security and important problems. So that seems like a great next endeavor. Congrats on starting that. Who is eligible to invest in that sort of thing? And what are ways that someone listening to this could help you with that?
Well, the folks that are eligible to invest in this fund are qualified purchasers. They have to have a pretty significant amount of net worth, like $5 million of liquid investments. So family offices, ultra high net worth individuals, or what are called like institutional investors, pension funds, that kind of thing. Those would be eligible investors. But yeah, it's a good way to spend time. We're really fired up about what we're doing. Like if you look at the geopolitical landscape and the world more broadly, like it's a really interesting inflection point in history. And as a nation, it is vital for us to be investing in these technologies and also to win in most of them, like cybersecurity. The Russians, the North Koreans, the Chinese have exceptional cybersecurity capabilities. We do as well. But there's a lot of wood to chop there, right? With AI, like it is critical that the United States has an advantage in AI and it's intellectual property race, right? So I feel like it's an important way to be spending our time. And then philosophically, you've seen in alternatives, you've seen a lot of organizations that exist to support one specific group, right? So there's like investors who target investing in female-focused funds, or investors that focus on building wealth for university endowments or whatever else. But there's not really anyone doing it for veterans. And we think it's a pretty consequential population that has, that we owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to as a nation. And so we want to build an asset management firm that is by veterans, that is for veterans, and is beneficial to our community, and help to pull more veterans into alternatives, because veterans are also one of the reasons that we focused on private equity and venture-backed clients at the MilVet is for two reasons. One, the number one predictor of whether a company will hire veterans is the presence of a veteran on the executive team. And so we felt like we could have an outsized impact by focusing there. And then two, veterans are terribly underrepresented in alternatives. There are a number of funds that are veteran led, but that is like the exception and not the norm. And so we think that veterans should have a say in the flow of capital in America, and that there's a great opportunity for us to be able to build a firm that does exactly that. So yeah, like I said, early innings, but feeling bullish and optimistic.
Well, unlike there's the catchphrase in investing, past performance is no indication of future results. I love the kind of the inverse of that is in for people or for professional pursuits, I think it's the opposite. I think the best indicator of future success is past results and past success. So you've obviously shown a lot of success in the MilVet, through the Marines, through business school, through a handful of endeavors. And so I imagine that's a tremendous indicator for success in this next venture. So excited to see how that plays out for you guys.
Yeah, I'm excited to see how it plays out too.
Well, as we start to wrap up, Brendan, one two-part question that we ask every guest. The first being an ask, and the second being a give. So, one ask, what's one way somebody listening to this could help you, provide value to you and what you're working on?
I don't have any like this is weird for an entrepreneur to say because usually you're always supposed to have an ask. If folks know people that might be interested in investing in U.S. national security who are high net worth or family office type folks, would love to meet them. But other than that, we don't really have a huge ask at the moment. I guess my ask is that people reach out, build new connections with folks in the private sector in order to prepare themselves really well to build like an amazing private sector career, and that they take good care of themselves because again, the transition out of the uniform is really challenging. I think it's really hard. And everybody talks about how hard it is. I'm not sure how valuable it is to keep harping on, oh, it's hard, it's hard. But I hope that that private sector careers and business more generally can do for other people what it's done for me, which is provide a lot of professional fulfillment and a lot of joy and enjoyment in learning new skills and solving new kinds of problems. So I guess my ask is that people just take good care of themselves because, you know, they've done a lot for our country and I'm personally grateful to them.
Awesome. And second part, anything you've given a lot, tremendous advice already on the show, but any give or anything you'd offer to somebody listening to this that has helped you or you found valuable along the way?
Yeah, I mean, reach out to people. I mean, I feel like beating a dead horse here, but reach out to people. It's always a good time to be making new friends, to be building connections, to be learning about private sector careers, and to just try and be helpful to other people. So, if I could recommend one thing, I'm like not a naturally, I think people assume that I'm like extremely extroverted. That's not really the case, but like I get out there and do it, and I'm always really happy that I did. So, yeah, I just encourage folks reach out, rebuild connections that might have gone dormant, build new connections and new friendships because it is what makes life worth living and it can be really helpful in your private sector career and you can be helpful to other people too. So yeah, that's my give.
Awesome. And I'm curious to get your take. One other topic before we adjourn here, but you've mentioned how key distribution is for not only startup success or business success, but probably, I mean, even marketing yourself for future jobs and opportunities. How do you think about distribution? How have you learned along the way how important that is to launching something or even just marketing yourself? And maybe this is along the same lines of, reach out to a lot of people and have those conversations, but are there any other kind of key insights you've had from that?
Well, I will say it's good to key in on this because my perspective on startups more holistically when I graduated from B school was like, you gotta have a great idea that's like novel and different, and then everything else will flow from that great idea or like some sort of business model innovation. And how I think about businesses now is in terms of distribution channels first. So when I hear about a business, I'm always wondering to myself, like, how are you gonna meet your customers? Who is your customer and how are you gonna meet them? And so one of the muscle movements I think we built with the MilVet is a culture of posting a lot on LinkedIn in order to generate some noise and get people to know that we exist, because that's how we meet new clients and that's how we meet candidates for our clients' open roles. So those distribution channels are extremely important. Different businesses have different types of distribution channels that they can access. So for raising a fund, it's a little bit different, right? It's like mostly going through relationships and warm intros, a little bit of like cold outreach as well, of course. But for the individual who's thinking about it as it pertains to their career, I feel like I see advice that people are like, oh, you should be posting a lot on LinkedIn if you're transitioning out of the military because that will get a lot of eyes on you. And that's not untrue. Like, it's true that it will get more eyes on you, but I'm not sure that it's very critical. And I think it's probably a lot more valuable for folks to be just reaching out one on one as their distribution channel. So I would encourage people to reach out essentially on LinkedIn and see if you can just make those one-on-one relationships before you try and scale it with marketing of some sort. Just because I think it's both more valuable and it's also lower risk. So when you're marketing something very publicly, it's not that there's like a tremendous amount of risk, but like, you do have to be like a little bit thoughtful about it. So anyway, I just encourage people, I guess, to reach out one-on-one probably more so.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, well, I appreciate you joining us. I know you're probably a busy guy, but we kind of look to your organization as something, we're similar in what we're trying to do. We're not as wide or as deep for sure, but we're just trying to give back as we can. But I appreciate what you've done in the past with MilVet, and what you're doing now quite potentially has, ramifications, larger impact on the national security as a whole. So it's really awesome what you're doing, and thank you for that, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. You guys are a couple of great Americans. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Veteran Ventures Podcast. If you heard something interesting or found the show to be helpful, send it to a friend who is transitioning out of the military or considering a transition. We'd also really appreciate if you left a rating and review of the show. That helps us reach more people with these amazing stories of successful veterans. We'll catch you next time on the Veteran Ventures Podcast. And until then, go do the thing. Make that decision, have that conversation, and go find your next mission.